A very good evening and welcome to another episode of South Africa Today and Beyond. I'm quite excited today. In the studio, I'm joined by Lebogang Mashile. She's a performer, an entertainer, a poet, a writer, published books. I mean, you do a lot of things.
I do a lot of different
Welcome
things.
to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm really excited, and we've been struggling to get you on the show. So finally, and this is the season finale. I'm so glad that you are closing off our season this year.
No, I'm honored to be here on your season finale. Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, you do a lot of things, but also maybe let's just go through your history.
Yeah.
You're born in exile in the States. Maybe let's take us through your journey and coming to South Africa eventually.
My parents are both from Johannesburg. They both grew up in Joburg. My dad in Western Native Township, which was Westbury, but then his family was relocated to Soweto. My mother was born in Sophia Town. Her family was relocated to Dube, also Soweto. They left South Africa as students. My father wanted to study engineering, and couldn't do it in South Africa, so he left in the late 60s. My mother left in the 70s. She was a student activist during the 1976 riots, She was studying at TEFLO, University of the North. She was doing law.
And this is the hub of the,
That's where a lot of, and people don't get the sense that, when you hear the history and the branding of 1976 is so much about Soweto, but actually the riots disrupted studies all over the country, So my mother had the choice between kind of staying and going to jail or leaving, and she left. They met in the US, started a family. I made the great trek back to South Africa as a toddler to stay with my grandparents so that my parents could finish their studies and, try to get some stability, I guess, as immigrants, exiles living in America. Went back to the US, did the bulk of my schooling there, primary school, half of high school. My family started transitioning back in the 90s. We moved back officially 1995. I was 16 years old. I finished high school here, went to university here. Really discovered my artistic voice here. I've always been a lover of books and literature, didn't really understand, how to build an artistic life. I never thought that was going to be something that was available to me. So I studied law at Wits. And then while I was finishing my undergraduate, I got hit by the poetry bug, fell in love with the underground art scene in Johannesburg, which was really amazing in the late 90s, early 2000s. There were lots of live spaces, live art, really interesting electro music, you could go out every single night of the week and see a different kind of live art, alternative spaces, and I guess that was the vibe of the country, Johannesburg at least, kind of post-revolution, the society in transition. So I really fell in love with that as a young person, and fell in love with seeing poetry being performed. I didn't think that was something that could be done, and I worked up the courage to do it and haven't stopped.
Oh man, it's a lot. I mean, look, art as a career, art as a way of paying the bills,
Yeah.
I mean, if you talk about within African society, it's
frowned upon.
Absolutely. You tell your mother, I want to be an artist. Like, you want to draw for a living, you want to paint for a living. What is that, But what are some of the challenges that, artists in South Africa interface with?
Oh, God.
Within the art space?
You make me laugh, I'm thinking about Braroni Mamwepa once said to me when he was still at the Department of International Affairs, I wonder if he's still there. Anyway, he said, since I'm at the station, like, do you still do recitals? Like, is that, the recitation? I was like, wow, that's my job. Okay. I think, when I started out, my fear certainly was going down the trajectory of a lot of South African artists, because there is no support system, because there is no, institutional support, because there is no protection of intellectual property, because there is a devaluation of creative labor, because there is a devaluation of just what arts and culture mean in a society, the artist as a human being kind of takes the brunt of all of that, right? And then if you're lucky, you get kind of fame as a reward, right? Or if you're lucky, if you're really, really lucky, you get longevity. But the people who get longevity are the people who really fight for it, Early in my career, I remember Don Laka saying there's the show and there's the business, So the show is about the artist, and the artist's mind is really creative, is like a child, right? But the business is where you have to be a grown-up, and the business is where you have to understand that you're dealing with an industry that is not interested in your health, your well-being, your wealth, or your survival. In fact, its survival and growth is really at your expense, and you have to kind of understand that. So I spent my 20s really fighting, trying to figure out how to resist, this nasty trajectory that so many creative people have gone through. I didn't want my mother to be sitting at baseline with a hat in her hand and people throwing coins in it to bury me. You know what I mean? I didn't want that life. I realized very early on that I've got a gift with language and I've got an ability to connect with people. So how can I take these things and multiply them? I'm lucky in the sense that everybody who knows me, everybody who's aware of my name knows that I'm a poet, but I have to take these things and figure out how to multiply them and earn a living. So I MC, I speak, I facilitate workshops, I perform, I act, I write, I do a lot of traveling. I do what it is that I have to do to push the limits of my gifts and my talent, to push my skill set, and to feed my family. And I mean, I'm 37 years old. I've been on stage for 16 years.
It's a long time.
It's a very long time. I'm very, 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 very lucky, but it's still a struggle, I still get calls up to today of people phoning me and wanting me to work for free, not understanding that what I do is labor, But I also get really amazing opportunities as well. As I get older, the more I'm realizing more and more that if you want to be the kind of artist that honors your purpose, you have to accept the fact that no one is going to hand you the work that you need to do. You know what I mean? Like, there'll always be the jobs that I have to do to be able to pay the bills, but nobody's going to hand me the work that's going to build my legacy. That's the work that I have to do on my own. That's the work that I have to prioritize. So as much as, you're lucky as an artist in South Africa if you can survive and pay the bills, if you're only preoccupied with surviving and paying the bills, that also is at the expense of your creativity and your vision, So you have to figure out how to do both at the same time, and have a family. And be a human being and take care of your health and.
Very important.
Yes.
And earlier we were talking about your involvement currently with the Departments of Arts and Culture and developing sort of a cultural policy for government that speaks to institutional support for artists. Maybe just explain to our viewers what that process is like.
So this was very exciting. I've been working with the Department of Arts and Culture as a part of a reference panel that has been working on drafting a new white paper for the Department of Arts and Culture. So 20 years ago, early on in our democracy, the first white paper, which was the first policy paper for the Department of Arts and Culture, the paper that decides the governing framework, the institutions that the Department of Arts and Culture will build, will fund, the major ways in which artists can be able to access support are enshrined in the white paper. So 20 years later, government has decided to do a review of this paper, and I was really lucky to serve on a panel with a lot of very experienced and very intelligent people, professors like Andries Oliphant, Moshe Kondo, Avril Joffe. I spent the better part of this year crisscrossing the country with them and interacting with artists across various sectors, writers, photographers, practitioners of indigenous knowledge systems, custodians of heritage, because now heritage is being incorporated as a core part of the Department of Arts and Culture, which is seen as a major oversight, that the department unfortunately made very early on in our democracy, but now it's being included squarely inside the Department of Arts and Culture, which is amazing. So I talk to heritage custodians, people who are crafters, filmmakers, performers, just across the gamut. And it was amazing because I realized that the bulk of creatives in South Africa are not interested in the things people would expect creative people to be interested in, like fame or, or like huge, massive wealth, which is great if you can get it. I also want it. But, most people just want to survive. Most people just want to be able to put bread on the table and want to be able to make their art. They just want the support to be able to put the messages out there that they need to put out there, It was also enlightening because, I think artists get labeled as being very dependent. We're always looking for handouts. We're always, we're always dysfunctional. And I met a lot of people who are very meticulous in what they do, who have built systems for themselves where there are none. Mm-hmm. I met a lot of people who really just want the space to be able to create, that's all they want. And to not have government tell them what to say. So this process has made me very proud to be an artist in South Africa. The white paper is now in its second draft. We just had an Indaba last week sharing the white paper with the arts community, but there'll be more media awareness being made about this white paper. There'll be more interviews. There'll be more opportunities for people to interact with it, you know. It's important that everybody in the creative sectors reads the white paper because there's some fundamental changes that are being made, you know, to our institutions in the arts sector. But I mean, overall, you know, at my age, to have had the experiences that I've had, you know, I feel really blessed, you know. I think it's also important for creatives to get involved in understanding how policy is made, you know. That shouldn't just be the work of academics, because ultimately this policy affects us, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's important for artists, for people who are involved in the creative sector, be in the room, you know, read the stuff, because this is gonna have an impact on your day-to-day life, how you live and how you work.
I mean, when you talk about heritage, you talk about culture, and I think this is what happens. You know, during 24th of September, Heritage Day, people think that, you know, culture, heritage includes just dressing up in your... And I think it's, to some extent, I mean, it's a bit offensive, you know, that it transcends beyond that.
It is.
And those of you within the cultural space, and I think you have a deeper appreciation of when you talk about culture, and when you're talking about incorporating within the heritage space, and institutionalizing, you know, all of that, the history of this country. But I'm just wondering, I mean, you're talking about arts within this, I mean, the spectrum, you know, crafters, your poetry, storytellers, you name it. I mean, it would have not been an easy task. But I want us to go off an ad break. When we come back, I want you to take us through the process. It would have not been easy to engage with people from different sectors within the arts space.
Yeah.
So when we come back from the ad break, I want us to deal with some of those complexities that you went through when drafting this white paper. So let's go for a quick ad break and we'll take it from there when you come back. Welcome from the ad break. I'm still in studio with Lebogang Mashile, and before the ad break, we're talking about her contribution serving on the reference panel for the Department of Arts and Culture and the new white paper on arts. And, you know, earlier on, we were talking about how, you know, the consultation process with different people within the arts industry, you know, create crafters, as you put it, storytellers, poets, you name it, musicians, and so on.
Visual artists, yeah.
And I mean, when we think about, when people talk about arts, and those of us who are not immediately in the art space, you know, we have a narrow thinking and a narrow vision of what art is.
It's unfortunate.
It's terribly unfortunate. But maybe take us through some of the challenges, the complexities, but also the lessons that you drew in terms of the consultation process in drafting the white paper.
So I served on the reference panel with a number of people who are very seasoned, accomplished academics who have extensive experience writing cultural policy and other kinds of policy. Andries Oliphant, the chairperson of the panel, was also the chairperson who drafted the original white paper, you know? So there's a lot of history, heritage, and huge, massive intellectual capital and experience that's invested in these people, you know? And then here I come, like 20 years younger than everybody, you know? So, I mean, the first challenge, I think, for me was also accepting that I have a viable contribution to be able to make, you know? Even if I don't have experience writing policy, you know what I mean? There's suggestions that I can make. It's important for me to be a body in the room because I live this experience. This is my work, you know? This is my identity. I am an artist working in South Africa. The other thing was also having to accept this kind of dual hat of on the one hand, representing the artistic community, you know, on the other hand, working, you know, with government, you know, but not being government, you know. Sure. So standing in front of a room of artists in a year like 2016, where so much explosive stuff is just happening in South Africa and worldwide, you know, many people feel failed by government. Many people feel failed by our public institutions, you know. So to stand up in a room full of artists, like being paid by the DAC, you know, by knowing that I'm there because of a government budget, you know, but at the same time also understanding that we're here to tell the truth, you know, we're not in the business of sugarcoating things, we're not in the business of window dressing to make things look good. What are your real needs, you know? And it was exciting also to see that when you present yourself when you present your integrity to people, you know, if it's real, people understand, you know, they get it immediately. So, you know, we didn't have to deal with a lot of government backlash because people understood, you know, what this was about. Some of the major revelations, artists don't own the value chain of the arts. in no matter what the cultural product is that you're producing. So in other words, Black South African artists do not own the value chain of the publishing industry, do not own the value chain of the visual arts industry, do not own the value chain of television, of the performance art industries. We are the bodies that populate it, but we don't actually own it, you know? This is a big systemic problem in the arts. It's also a bigger systemic problem across South Africa that we don't own value chains of businesses as Black people in J, you know? So because of that, we don't have the resources that we need to be able to do the work that we have to do, you know what I mean? If you're a writer, you need residencies. You need spaces where you know that your survival is secure, so that you can go off and be able to produce what it is that you need to be able to produce. If you're a visual artist, you need space to work. You also need materials to be able to work. You also need time to be able to study and research and develop work. You know, if a lot of time does not go into research development, then you see it in the end product of what we produce. It's not that South African artists are inferior to artists in the world. You know, without institutional support, you don't have the time, you don't have the money that you need to be able to invest in creating quality work, you know? So you end up seeing the same kinds of people producing world-class work, because those are the people who have had support all their careers, you know? Which is something that really needs to change, you know? It was exciting to see that artists just want to get on with the business of making art, you know? As much as we live in a world where people are obsessed with fame and visibility and what, you know, if you're a photographer who's sitting in Uppington doing your work, you know, you don't have fantasies about being, you know, famous, you know what I mean? Artists in this country are devoted to what they do because it takes a lot of willpower and a lot of purpose to make the decision to choose this path, you know? So the people who we were consulting with were people who were already very committed to what they do. And because they're committed, they're productive. And you see it in the work that they do, you know? Artists in this country are on a mission. People want to give, you know? So they just want to know, more than anything, people wanted more support to be able to do the kind of work that they know that they're called to do. And they wanted to know that government is not going to interfere with the messages. So if I apply to a public institution for support, you know, is that institution then going to tell me what it is that I have to say? Or am I going to be put into a corner where I can't criticize, you know, the government because I'm receiving government funding to be able to do my work? So we had to be able to make those kind of guarantees to people, and also, you know, lobby very strongly, advocate within the white paper itself, you know, that it's important, it's fundamental for democracy that artistic freedom and freedom of expression are enshrined, no matter who is in power, you know, no matter what kind of support you're offering people, because that's a cornerstone of our democracy. If that goes, you know, then the whole thing falls apart, you know? Then you won't have any public institutions that'll be able to criticize anyone because the people themselves cannot criticize anybody, you know? And artists lead the way in terms of these kinds of conversations. I mean, globally, it's been mapped, you know? When you see a political revolution pop up in any corner of the world, it's preceded usually by an artistic revolution. You know, it's artists that populate new ideas, you know, and that it's artists that do the work of conscientizing. So if you put a muzzle around an artist's mouth, you know, whether it's their own survival or whether it's freedom of expression, you know, if you put a muzzle around the mouth of an artist, you're essentially putting a muzzle around the mouth of the entire society.
I mean, you're raising critical issues. The one is about, you know, artists being able to better their craft, you know? Mm-hmm. And the unfortunate part also is most of the time that we see what the so-called standard, you know, people talk about Hollywood, I want to make it into Hollywood, and they paint that as a standard. And you talk about the fact that, you know, you're fantastic artists, you know, in different parts of South Africa that you've interacted with, you know, a photographer in Uppington who said, this is my work and this is what I'm doing. Yeah. And this is the standard that I've set for myself, and I improve my own craft. So there are those issues as well. But then again, you know, in a democratic country, 20 years into democracy, can we really say, you know, and we had this conversation in the show a while back about the fact that you don't have an institution of higher learning dedicated to the arts in this country. Yeah. That's just tasked with the, you know, just producing art every single day in whatever form there is. And within the white paper, is there a conversation like that to see an institution solely on helping artists develop their crafts?
There's a lot of conversation in the white paper around education, and education at multiple levels, starting with at community level. You know, people need to be able to access the arts in their own communities, in community centers. There needs to be a basic level of education when it comes to making people aware of the arts, bringing the arts into spaces that are familiar to people so that art doesn't doesn't become something that lives in some corner that, that you never have access to.
But also the lack of the stigma, taking away the stigma within African communities.
Yeah. And I mean, that's something that artists were advocating for across the country. So of course, that's in the white paper. I think probably the hardest thing is to get the country as a whole to recognize the arts as a valuable part of our economy, not just like window dressing, not just a nice to have, but an essential to have for our emotional, intellectual, spiritual development as a people, but also an essential to have because this huge value chain also is economic. It's about survival. One of the big revelations that happened for me was realizing that there is a real need for transformation in the technical support side of the arts. So you look at like a Beyonce world tour and you see these massive light rigs, special effects, water on the stage, ning, there's fire,
and there's smoke coming from somewhere.
And then there's smoke coming from somewhere. There's always wind on her, dancers. That's all technical, that's all technical. If you don't have the technical capacity to be able to execute those kind of shows, you're never gonna, even if you have the vision sitting in South Africa, you cannot produce it.
I know my producer Linda and Akita sitting there thinking, yes, preach, Lebo, preach, that's us right there.
Yeah, and we need to also get young people to understand that those are viable jobs, and those are jobs within the arts where there is longevity. You can do sound until the day that you die, You may not be able to dance on stage until the day that you die. That's reality, So realizing that we need to build an institution particularly just for technical. Also realizing that transformation of the arts is going to be a long project, If we started today to make the kind of investment that this society really deserves in the arts in terms of educating people at all levels about the arts, creating the educational institutions, creating enabling policy, it would still take at least a generation for this kind of transformation to happen, It would take at least a generation for that to be enshrined in us, So it's also understanding that this is a very long game, I'm a decade plus into my career, working with people who are 3, 4, 5 decades into their careers, who've been able to map, the journey of this country is also a very sobering experience, because I realized that this is a marathon, When you're chasing fame and you're chasing gigs and you're chasing the now, that's a short game, That's a sprint. But actually building a life as an artist, building a career, a sustainable career is marathon. Your vision has to be that big.
And I can see, you've really diversified in terms of an artist. You do a lot of things.
Yeah.
Writing. Now there's albums, Lebogang Mashile Live, the books that you've produced, performing, storytelling. It's quite a lot, but how do you do it? And this is in conclusion, and also attempting to encourage young people there that want to enter into the art space. How does somebody like yourself do it?
I think the explosion that happened at the beginning of my career happened because I had a big point to prove, so I worked relentlessly. There was a period of time, there was a kind of 4-year period, between 2003, 2007, I did 2 books and an album. I did 78 episodes of Latitude. I did, I traveled to 12 different countries. That was the first initial push, and I burned myself out severely, It took me a couple of years to come out of that, I'm grateful for the fact that I did it because that enabled me to have the kind of reach that allows me to work the way that I work now, But I think, if I was a young artist coming up now, certainly, what I would do is concentrate my efforts on having as much control over my own creativity as I possibly can. And I think it's possible right now, particularly with the internet, With the internet, you can have a conversation with your own audience, directly. The people who care about you can come and find you, and you can populate the internet with as much content as you want. If I was coming up right now, again, in the music, entertainment, television production, literature, start from the bottom and learn behind the scenes, Learn as much of the technical part of your craft as you possibly can, Learn what all the jobs around the star are, because those are the jobs that last the longest, And those are the jobs that are going to help you to be able to execute your vision in the way that you want to, You can't hire people if you don't know what it is that they do. You know what I mean? Sure. So even as you execute your own concepts, you'll have a firm understanding of what it takes to be able to do that, We need more Black producers. We need more Black publishers. We need more black people who actually own these aggregators of intellectual property. We need more black people to buy visual art. I mean, the visual art scene is one scene that just needs a complete transformation. There's so many black talented visual artists, but I mean, how many black galleries are there in this country, and how many black collectors are there in this country, So in the visual arts, which are hugely lucrative, right? But they play this game, the same kind of game that the record companies play, the same kind of game that publishing houses play, where the artist is the one who's forced to pay for creative products at the end of the day out of your own sales. And then you still don't own like your stuff, which is, I mean, just crazy. We need black collectors so that we can build up black visual artists. We need black people to appreciate the arts. Like it's not just
Unfortunately, we're running
sorry.
out of time.
I'm
We've
sorry.
run out of time, but I mean, really thank you for the contributions, and I think people sitting at home listening to this will take this to heart. Thank you so much for joining us
It's
on
a
the show,
pleasure.
and
I
I
can go
hope
on
you
and
come
on.
back. I hope you come back.
I hope so too.
When we come back for season 2.
Thank you
so
much.
much for those sitting at home, and thank you for watching. And this is the season finale. See you second season of South Africa Today and Beyond. Have a good evening.